It's a slow afternoon for police in Colorado Springs when patrol officers Matt Savard and Jeff Parker make a routine traffic stop.
How are you doing today, sir?
All right, officer, how you doing?
You know how fast you were going?
Maybe a little bit over.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. You have your license or registration handy?
Yes, sir, I do.
But suddenly their quiet day kicks into high gear.
Is this your correct address?
It is.
31 golf. Go ahead, sir.
We've got a female victim who just called in and said she's been shot at 2526 Forest Hill Road.
10-4 en route. Rook, let's go. Got a shooting call.
This is your lucky day. Watch the door. Watch the door.
Go around back. It's locked.
When officers first get on scene, they're unable to get inside the residence.
Hey, we've got somebody on the floor with blood. Let's go in.
Clear.
Clear. 31 golf.
Hold on, okay?
We have a female white, mid-20s, possible gunshot wound to the neck or face.
There was a large amount of blood oozing from her neck area, from her mouth area.
Who did this to you?
They're trying to ask her questions. They're not getting much of a response because of the injuries to her throat.
Your stomach.
Pregnant.
You pregnant?
The victim was pregnant. She was worried about her child.
Hold on, ma'am. Help's on the way, okay? Hold on.
A few miles away, Lt.Joe Kenda is nearing the end of what has been a crazy day.
We had all kinds of things happening. People being arrested, people being interrogated, would run out of detectives to deal with all these people. So I was escorting a handcuffed person into an interrogation room.
Lieutenant, just got word that a woman's been shot in her home on the east side. Apparently she's pregnant.
All right, give me a second. All right, have a seat right there. Let's go.
When I heard that this is a young woman who's pregnant, that really upset me. Nothing is more innocent than a child. I find the officers are first on the scene. What can they tell me about this? All I know is a headline: pregnant female shot.
Lieutenant,
How you doing?
good.
So what we got?
We learned from the neighbors that the resident's name is Teresa Austin, mid-20s. Looks like she took her around near the neck or face that possibly traveled into her chest.
What's your condition?
She couldn't talk much when we got here, but we do have an officer in the ambulance with her trying to get additional information.
All right, keep me posted.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As Kenda enters Teresa Austin's home, his attention is drawn to the blood-stained floor and the telephone receiver, which is also covered in blood.
We find a gun?
Not yet, but we found one 9mm casing.
Kenda follows the trail of blood into the back bedroom.
There is blood on the bed, and there is a large blood stain on the floor.
We found the victim lying there.
My opinion, looking at the scene, she's shot on the bed and either falls or rolls and winds up collapsing on the floor.
Was the door locked when you got here?
Yes, sir.
The place is undamaged. It wasn't forced entry. This is not some random crime. There's something else happening here.
Whoa, what's this?
There is evidence of a child. There are children's toys, small clothing, obviously not for a newborn, but for a child that lives there.
All right, when you're talking to people, make sure you ask about kids. If you have any children, I want to make sure they're okay.
Yes, sir.
A whole new question comes up now. Where are the children and who are they? Who are they with? Are they safe?
All right, let's go outside, see what the neighbors have to say.
Investigators start canvassing the neighborhood, and they were able to find a neighbor who was a good friend of Teresa.
Lieutenant. This is Christina. She's a friend of Teresa's.
How's Teresa?
She's at Penrose Hospital being treated.
Oh my God, this is horrible.
Is there a boyfriend or husband that we could contact?
Christina tells us that Teresa lives with her common-law husband, who she identifies as James Austin.
I was just with them a few hours ago down the street at the pool hall.
How are they getting along?
Fine. I mean, they seem normal.
Here it is.
Let's see if Mom is on.
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah.
You're gonna do
Baby,
better than
I mean, good luck.
I mean, not that I'm gonna do any better.
She said no angry words were exchanged. They were very much in love and laughing and joking.
Do they have any kids?
Yeah, she has 3, and she's 4 months pregnant with her next.
You know where the kids are?
I believe she dropped them off at her brother's house earlier today.
Okay, good. How about the husband? Do you know where he is?
I thought they came home together.
Christina tells Kenda that Teresa's husband James often goes by his nickname.
Christina says nobody calls him James. Everybody calls him Mookie. He's in his middle 20s. All his friends are in their middle 20s, and they may know where he is.
Can you give me the names of any of his friends?
Yeah, there's actually a couple right over there.
Christina points them out and says the one guy's name is Darius, and the other guy's name is Ota.
What can you tell me about them?
They've all been friends for a while, but I heard that Mookie and Oda got into a fight a few days ago.
What kind of fight? Did they argue?
Oh no, it definitely got physical. I heard that Mookie beat up Oda pretty bad.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Now that interests me. That produces revenge as a motive. What if in the act of revenge, they wind up shooting Teresa by mistake? Or maybe they just go after his old lady because they can't find him. There's a lot of possibilities there.
Gentlemen, I understand you're friends with Mookie?
I don't know no Mookie. You know Mookie? No.
They're the usual non-cooperative, unhelpful, it's the typical street crap that you deal with all the time.
So you guys are just hanging out here in front of this house?
Oh, no.
Let's cut the boys. I'm in no mood. Someone just shot Mookie's wife.
They looked surprised when I said that.
We know him and stuff, but we hadn't seen him all day.
Mind if we look in your car?
Whatever.
All right, step over here.
When I look in this car,
got blood.
I see dried blood on the visor. Now they're not going anywhere.
When do you want to tell me how you got blood in the car?
What? What are you talking about?
Put cuffs on these guys, put them in the car.
Are you serious? Oh, come on. Ridiculous. What are you doing? Come on, man.
We hook them up and put them in the back of a police car, and we get a warrant for the car.
Man, we didn't shoot nobody.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Until then, just sit tight, gentlemen.
Seeing the blood in that car, they could be players in this. Nobody's going anywhere until I find out. We're investigating the shooting of a 24-year-old pregnant woman, Teresa Austin. We have 2 guys who suddenly show up at this crime scene, one of whom has had violent confrontations with the victim's husband in the recent past. There's blood in his car. We're going to find out who that blood belongs to.
Let's get a sample of that blood, see if it matches our victim.
Sure.
We're not going to do a DNA test in the field. That's in the movies. But we can do a blood type. Is it type O? Is it type B, type AB? They can do that.
Ota denies his alleged confrontation with Mookie ever happened, but Kenda continues to press for answers.
Is anyone ready to offer up an explanation how the blood got in the car?
That's probably from when we were slap boxing.
What's slap boxing?
Oda explained that's where guys get together and they start slapping each other in the face and who can hit who the hardest and stand it better. And, and one of them had gotten a bloody nose, and that's how the blood got there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
Lieutenant, can I speak to you for a second?
What's up?
Ran a quick test on the blood in the car, compared it to the victim. There's no match. Totally different types.
All right, I guess we have no reason to hold these clowns anymore. Go ahead and cut them loose.
Take them out.
This is the highs and lows of murder cases. You're feeling pretty good, and all of a sudden, oh no, it collapses.
You guys should probably cut out the slap boxing crowd before he causes you more trouble.
So we're back to where we started.
Kenda now believes his best hope for solving the case may rest with the victim herself. He heads to Penrose Hospital, where Teresa Austin has just been wheeled out of surgery.
She survives the surgery. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to live, but it's certainly a good sign.
Excuse me, doctor?
Yes.
How's she doing?
She's still under anesthesia, but it won't be very long now. So if you want to go to the waiting room, I'll have someone come get you when she's coherent.
Okay, we'll do that.
While waiting for Teresa to recover, Kenda comes across another potential lead.
Yes, I know. But it's bad. They're not even sure if Teresa's gonna live.
I'm in the patient waiting area. There's a woman on the phone. And I heard her say Teresa this and Teresa that. Well, that's obviously somebody that's connected to our victim.
I love you too, honey. Okay, bye.
Excuse me, are you related to Teresa Austin?
She said, I'm her mother. My name is Ramona.
I'm Lieutenant Kenda from the Colorado Springs Police Department. I'm very sorry about what happened to your daughter.
Thank you.
I said, how kind of relationship does she have with Mookie? They get along fine?
He and Teresa have been together over 7 years. He was so happy about the pregnancy.
He's very, very good with the children. He's an excellent father.
Excuse me, Mrs. Zorens, Lieutenant. She's awake right now if you would like to see her.
She is in awful, awful condition. She is bandaged. She is bruised and swollen. She's on a respirator to assist her in breathing because her mouth is wired shut. She's not going to say a word, but she is conscious and reasonably alert.
I know you can't speak. Can you write? If you think you can write, blink twice for yes and once for no.
She blinks her eyes twice. So I go to one of my guys, give me your notebook and a pen. And we provide those to her.
All right, take your time and tell me what happened.
She tried to write the answers as much as she could. She was in pain. She'd gone through hours of surgery.
She writes, I can remember everything. Throwing up blood, shooting out, gushing. I remember pulling my brains through my mouth. Then I couldn't breathe. I just laid there shocked for a while.
In her note, Teresa also details the bizarre behavior of her shooter.
He was holding me so it would stop bleeding, but he just sat there rocking me. I started going hysterical. He left me for half an hour bleeding. I laid there thinking he called 911. Then I crawled in the living room and called myself.
Teresa's account of the incident is gut-wrenching, but she hasn't yet answered Kenda's most pressing question.
Teresa, tell me who did this to you.
I looked at her and I said, do you know who shot you? And she blinks twice. Well then, darling, tell me who it is. Write his name on that piece of paper. So we're investigating the shooting of this 24-year-old pregnant lady. She's out of surgery. She's unable to speak because her mouth is wired shut, but she can write. And she keeps referring in her notes to he. Who is he? Write down his name. I watch her form the first letter, and the first letter is an M.
No, it can't be.
She continues to work his name and spells it out. Mookie. That's who shot her. That is who is cradling her, and that's who abandoned her to die. You read that, and you want to go find Mookie and put a gun in his mouth and pull the trigger.
Oh my God.
Okay, Ramona. Tell me where I can find him.
I don't know. Maybe at his sister's house.
What's his sister's name? What's her address?
Sheila. She lives on the other side of town.
Write down the address for me.
So she's giving us a place to start. Now we're just going to go find him and drag him into a courtroom.
Within minutes, Kenda is en route to the home of Mookie's sister, Sheila Austin.
So we go to Sheila's place, and the minute we arrive, she's not surprised we're there.
I know why you're here. And he's not here. He left a while ago. And he told me he shot Teresa.
She was surprisingly truthful.
Did he tell you what happened?
He said they were at a pool hall. And when they got home, they got into a fight. And he shot her.
What was the fight about?
I don't know. Mookie probably thought she was looking at some guys at the bar again or something. He can get really jealous sometimes.
She says Mookie, he was overly jealous, overprotective of her, always believed she was cheating on him.
Has Mookie been violent towards her before?
Yeah, he's beaten her. One time she was hanging outside his car window, and he just drove off and dragged her. She got hurt real bad. Cut up her knees and everything.
Really? So it's gone on a long time?
Yeah, for years now.
She's no stranger to him physically abusing her. This is a domestic abuse circumstance.
Any idea where I can find him?
He talked about turning himself in, so maybe he went to go see his lawyer. I think his name was Johnson or something.
Thanks for your help.
After leaving Sheila's house, Kenda heads to the law office of Mookie's attorney, Robert Johnson.
We go over to where that lawyer's office is, and in the parking lot is the attorney, and he has Mookie by the arm.
Ah, just the people I was looking for.
Just relax, Lieutenant. I was bringing him in.
Perfect. I'll save you the gas. Put your hands behind your back. Did you inform James of his rights?
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can...
Just so you know, I've told him not to say anything to you guys.
The attorney says he is exercising his right to remain silent. Fine. So noted. Thank you, counselor. And we take his client off of his hands.
Although Mookie isn't talking, Kenda can make a reasonable guess as to how the crime went down.
My opinion is this. They're in this pool hall with their friends. Everything's fine.
Feeling okay?
Yeah.
Another code for you?
Oh, thank you. Gosh, I wasn't even done with this one.
Trying to anticipate needs.
Okay, thanks. You're really good.
Thank you. You need anything else right now? Okay.
Good.
Yeah?
He's good.
Do you need another beer?
No.
No? Sure. Let me know if you guys need anything.
Thanks. What?
But Mookie is jealous by nature, and he probably thinks she gives somebody a look that she shouldn't have.
Oh my God, the bathroom's here. Don't go in there. No. Yeah, no, it's bad. Yeah, really bad.
You guys ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. You're gonna go? That's fine.
He waits until they go home out of the presence of Christina.
Why are you always looking at guys like that?
I'm not.
Teresa, do not play with me.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Teresa, I don't want to hear why Do you think I'm stupid, Teresa?
Stop! No, what are you doing? You're acting crazy.
Are you cheating on me again, Teresa?
No,
Are you cheating on me again?
You're crazy.
The argument begins, as it always does, only this time it escalates.
I have a baby inside of me.
Do you think I'm stupid? No. I don't want to hear it. I know you're lying.
So our man shoots her during the course of this argument. Then he realizes that he's taken this incredible step.
Teresa, no.
In her own words, she says, he just sat there rocking me.
You're okay. I didn't mean to do that. I promise.
He is rocking her like that's somehow going to make all this go away. That she's going to suddenly stop bleeding. He then forms the opinion, apparently, that she's dead, and he puts her on the floor, and he walks out of the place and never looks back. She lays there, she says in her notes, for 30 minutes, expecting that he went and called 911. What he did was leave. She then crawls out of that bedroom. She's a powerful woman. She is instinctively strong as a person. She's concerned about her pregnancy. I'm going to crawl to a phone and try to live. I'm not going to lay here and die.
Ma'am, what's your emergency? I've been shot.
As far as I'm concerned, the matter is pretty well closed. We have him in custody. We have a workable, provable case against him. The victim is in the hands of medical. We wait and see what happens.
Last night? And the baby?
That evening, word arrived from the hospital. The news isn't good.
I see. Thank you.
Both Teresa and her baby have died.
It's always difficult when you have a surviving victim in grievous condition that you're able to communicate with. And for a moment, a brief moment in time, you think, well, maybe, just maybe, this is going to work out. And in just as quickly of a moment, it's all taken away. She dies, and the baby dies too.
For James Austin, aka Mookie, Teresa's passing means the death penalty is now squarely on the table. Unwilling to take his chances at trial, Mookie and his attorney strike a deal with prosecutors.
In the course of the court proceedings, he did plead guilty to a manslaughter charge and received a 25-year sentence in Colorado Department of Corrections.
Days later, as Kenda reviews Teresa's medical report, he is struck by the irony of one image in particular.
I'm looking at the pictures of her on the table that they take before they cover the body and take it to the morgue for an autopsy. And right above her chest is a tattoo. And it says, Mookie. How nice. It's the tragic nature of this particular event. 3 kids don't have a mother. A baby never gets a chance at life. And a mother survives a mere 24 years and never sees her children grow up either.
Coming up, when the body of a man is found floating in a creek, Kenda faces one of his most puzzling cases yet.
I have a 37-year-old guy, and he is dead in Monument Creek. How did this person die? I have no idea. It's a mystery.
At the Colorado Springs Police Department, Lt.Joe Kenda is busy educating rookies on the finer points of securing a crime scene.
Besides preservation of evidence, limiting access is your highest priority.
We would occasionally instruct both men and women on the police department in various phases of death investigation, their responsibilities in terms of crime scene containment and what our expectations were when they would respond to a violent crime.
No one gets in. No friends, no relatives, no press. You guys are the gatekeepers.
Excuse me, Lieutenant. We need you. We have a floater up in Monument Creek.
All right, that's it for today. We'll pick it up later.
The expression floater implies death and suspicious circumstances. You have a body that's been discovered either underwater or in the water in Monument Creek.
Navigating through the underbrush, Kenda makes his way to the edge of the creek.
Hey, Lieutenant.
Hey, Adam. So what do we got?
They point behind them, and there is a male fully dressed. His clothes are intact, his feet and everything are out on the bank, but his upper body is face down in the water.
Waiting on somebody from the coroner's office. That's why we haven't moved him. But they're en route. Should be here any minute.
All right, you want to check the other side? We'll check down this way.
Yes, sir.
As Kenda waits for the coroner to arrive, he searches the area for evidence.
Keep your eye out for any tire tracks, too, in case somebody dumped the body.
Yes, sir.
The fact that the body was found in the creek, in a kind of a remote area, leads you to believe a lot of different things. He could have been assaulted there. He could have died somewhere else and been dumped at this location.
Anything? Nothing over here.
Obviously, with the creek flowing through there is potential for loss of physical evidence, water taking it, floating it downstream. So we have to be concerned about that.
Coroner's here.
How you doing? That's how they found him.
You want to see if these guys can get him out of there?
All right, guys, let's pull him out.
Officers remove the body from the creek, giving Kenda his first real look at the victim.
3, 2, 1. Come over.
I see the remains of a Caucasian male, probably in his middle 30s.
All right, we're ready to lift in 3, 2, 1, lift.
Looks like he's been in there for a while.
He's almost frozen in place from the same position when it was in the water. The body's in full rigor, so it's like moving a statue in some ways.
No indication of any gunshot wounds.
We're looking for traumatic injury. Has he been stabbed? Has he been strangled? Any broken, obvious bones in the chest? You feel the rib cage. Does it feel intact?
It's like there's some head trauma.
We have a significant head injury here, but we have nothing else. So all we have to be concerned about is the injury we see to the upper right crown of his skull.
I'll go ahead and check his pockets, see if there's any ID. Can you open it for me? Curtis Kelly, age 37. So how'd you get in here, Mr. Kelly?
While pondering that question, Kenda notices a strange group of tents just up the creek.
You two want to come with me, go check out those tents?
There are people who reside in this creek bed, commonly known as bridge people. They drink there, they argue with each other, they fight over money.
There can be real territoriality, so you could potentially step on somebody's toes without even realizing and run into trouble with somebody who considered that territory theirs. That's not hard to imagine.
For Kenda, the presence of this homeless encampment could explain Curtis Kelly's death.
What if Mr. Kelly is wandering around in Monument Creek for whatever reason, and he runs into one of these guys, and they take him wrong somehow, and they hit him with something, then he falls in the water. Is that possible? Absolutely.
Is there anybody here?
Who's asking?
I'm with the police and I'd like to talk to you. What's your name?
Freddie.
Freddie who?
Just Freddie.
When you're dealing with these individuals, talking with them can be very difficult. And they have a real distrust of police.
Can we cut the one-word answers, Freddie? I've got a dead guy in the creek back there.
Yeah, I know.
He said, I saw something. I thought it was clothes, and I could always use clothes. So I walked down there, and it's not clothes. It's a dead guy.
How'd he get in the creek?
Hell if I know. I'm just trying to mind my own business.
Let me see your hands.
You're looking at him. Has he got any bruises or cuts or stuff on his hands? Has he got any blood on his clothes? That all goes in his favor that, yeah, he's probably telling us the truth.
He tells a reasonable story as best as he can. We have no evidence against him. We have to dismiss him.
How about you two? You know anything about that? Let me see your hand. All right. Thanks. You know, our boy Freddie doesn't know much. Just through a medical found out.
Oh. At this point, what we have is what we refer to as a coroner's case. There's no evidence to support a crime, but it's a 37-year-old guy, and he is dead in Monument Creek and not in a hospital. So it's our job to determine how this happened. So the coroner is going to take this body to the El Paso County morgue and will conduct a postmortem examination, an autopsy.
Let's head back to the station, do a background check on this guy, see if we can find any information.
We run the name through identification records. We determine Mr. Kelly has no criminal history. We do find a heavy equipment operation company.
That must be where he works. I want to write that address down.
So we decide to go to the place of employment. And contact the manager on duty.
Good morning.
How you doing? From CSPD.
What can I do for you?
What can you tell us about one of your employees, Curtis Kelly? Is he a good worker?
He was one of my best. I wish I had more guys like him.
Does he have any family?
No. He did have a girlfriend that he was really into, though.
According to the manager, Curtis had fallen hard for a girl named Ashley Cameron.
He'd fallen in love with a girl named Ashley. She, at that point, was also really, really interested in him.
He says he became kind of a different guy for a while. He was anxious to get off work because he had to go see his girlfriend.
Well, apparently things were going well there for a while, and then all of a sudden, I guess they broke up, and boom, his whole demeanor changed. And he seemed really depressed.
Curtis went downhill very fast and got the living out of the bottle and drank quite heavily, which was not common for Curtis to do.
We're getting a little more than just a man laying in a creek bed. This man's upset about the loss of a female. My experience tells me that there's nothing more emotional than the loss of a love affair. And alcohol is a depressant. For someone who's already depressed, it's a very bad idea.
Kenda isn't sure what happened between Curtis and his girlfriend, but his gut tells him she may know something about her ex's death.
If you wind up with a dead person, the first person you want to look for is whomever they might be in love with. When love ends, people do crazy things.
Lieutenant Kenda, dispatch.
Dispatch?
Yeah, I need you to give me an address for an Ashley Cameron.
It is not unusual for someone to be murdered by their friend, or their lover, or their wife, or their husband. When humans become connected by blood, by marriage, or by emotion, things can get out of control, and somebody can die as a result. We're investigating what is ultimately a mysterious death. We have a 37-year-old man partially submerged in Monument Creek. He is dead. We don't know why. We don't know how. We're trying to determine the method and manner, and we've been pursuing it from every perspective.
After speaking with co-workers of the victim, Curtis Kelly, Kenda has a sneaking suspicion Curtis's ex-girlfriend, Ashley Cameron, may have had a hand in his death. But before he speaks with Ashley, Kenda makes a pit stop at the coroner's office.
Hey, Doc.
Hey, Joe.
Any info on our guy yet?
Some of the basic stuff's in.
The first initial finding I discovered from the coroner is that he has water in his lungs. It means he was alive when he went in the water. This eliminates any consideration that he was dead by other means.
You think somebody drowned him?
Based on what I saw where we found the body, I'd say that's unlikely.
The difficulty with that scenario is there's no marks, no other sets of footprints opposing the body. There's no apparent struggle by the body. People don't submit to being drowned. They fight.
I should have some additional info in another hour or two. Do you want to check back?
Thank you.
Okay.
The discovery of water in Curtis Kelly's lungs has Kenda thinking his death wasn't the result of a violent lover's quarrel, but he decides to pay Curtis's ex-girlfriend a visit, just to be sure.
Ashley Cameron?
Yes?
Lieutenant Kenda from the Colorado Springs Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind if I come in? I need to talk to you about Curtis Kelly.
Okay. Yeah, come in.
We inform Ashley the reason we're there is because we're investigating the yet undetermined death of Curtis Kelly. She said she cares about Curtis Kelly, but she just didn't think he'd be right for her.
We just didn't have a spark. I ended up having to break it off.
And she advised him that she was going to start dating other people.
How do you take that?
Not very well. I'm sorry, Curtis. That's just how I feel.
I don't understand.
Curtis, you didn't do anything wrong. I like you.
I can change.
Sometimes it just doesn't work out.
She said, I knew he was really upset, and I felt bad about that. But by the same token, it was time for him to move on. It was time for me to move on.
Can you tell me about your relationship with Curtis?
He was a nice guy. However, I don't think he had many girlfriends before me.
This could explain the level of his disturbance over losing her. I know more about Ashley now. I know that she's a very upstanding person, and she's not involved in this in any way, and their relationship was absolutely normal. I also know that he's been drinking heavily from his coworker, which is unusual for him. So I returned to the morgue.
Hey, Joe.
Hey. So, we got anything new on Curtis Kelly?
Yeah, actually, his BAC was really up there. He was hammered.
Okay. How much alcohol was in his system?
Just above 0.30.
Really? Wow.
Over 0.2, you can't hit the ground with your hat. Over 0.3, you're close to unconscious. Curtis was absolutely blasted. He'd been drinking for an extended period of time to get it that high. You can't really do that in a day.
You know, I'm starting to think this might have been an accident.
That's what I'm thinking, too. He's extremely intoxicated.
He is so intoxicated. At 0.3 and above, there's no question that he is unable to participate in an altercation. Also, he would be in a position of not having the necessary motor skills to take his own life. So, if there is no suicide, if there is no homicide, what is there? There is a stumbling drunk.
Based upon witness statements, along with the coroner's report and the evidence collected, Kenda has an idea of how events unfolded.
For whatever reason that may be never to be known, is in Monument Creek. He is a guy wandering along with a broken heart. He is lost in his own depression over the loss of perhaps the only love he's ever known. He is helplessly intoxicated. He trips, he falls, he hits his head, his face goes in the water. He is breathing, but instead of breathing air, he's drawing water into his lungs. He is so intoxicated, he doesn't realize he's in trouble. He doesn't understand he's drowning. He made no attempt to even lift his head. Lifting his head would have been enough. But he was so drunk he couldn't even do that. Goodbye, Mr. Kelly.
It's almost too bad that there's no way to measure brokenheartedness, because it is devastating. I mean, all you want to do is just find a way to make it better. Probably Curtis turned to the bottle to do that. It was unfortunate. Oh God, if he'd just hung in there a little bit longer, it would have gotten better.
Mr. Kelly is suffering that deep pain of loss. His answer to this pain is alcohol. He doesn't understand that alcohol is a depressant, and all it's going to do is deepen the pain. He's not going to feel better. He's going to feel worse. But he doesn't know that. And he never has the opportunity to find it out. Your own emotions are as destructive, and perhaps more so, than a bullet or a blade or a bottle of poison.
California, 1996. Heat still clinging to the sidewalks long after sunset. Streetlights buzzing like insects over empty intersections, and a voicemail message that should not exist, because the woman it belonged to was already gone. Not dead on paper, not confirmed in a morgue, not named in any obituary, just gone, swallowed by a Friday night that left a town blinking at daylight like it had been punched awake. The message is short, broken by static, the kind you get when the phone line is old and the air is dry, and behind her voice there's something else, a thin sound that could be wind through palm fronds, or a car passing too fast. But detectives who've listened to it 1,000 times swear they can hear a second breath, too close to the receiver, too patient, like someone waiting for her to finish speaking. Her name was Marisol Vega, 26, a grocery clerk by day, a student at night, a woman who wrote reminders on sticky notes and paid her rent early when she could, the kind of person who kept other people's lives from falling apart even while her own was held together with routine and caffeine. She lived in a small complex off a frontage road where the freeway never truly shut up, where the walls were thin enough to leak TV laughter and muffled arguments. On that Friday, she clocked out at 9:12 p.m., signed her receipt, waved to the manager, stepped into the parking lot under fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale, and then, like a switch flipped, Marisol became a gap in the story. The first shock didn't come from the police. It came from the people who knew her patterns. Marisol never missed her Saturday morning call with her mother. She never skipped class without texting her friend first. She never left her car below half a tank. But when dawn arrived, her phone rang into nothing, her bed stayed untouched, and the air around her name started to thicken with that old, familiar dread, missing. Not late. Not out. Missing. By noon, her roommate was banging on doors, asking if anyone had seen her come in, if anyone heard a fight, if anyone noticed a strange car. The answers were the same kind of nothing. Shrugs, half memories, neighbors who said they were asleep, neighbors who said they kept to themselves. And then the detail that made everyone's stomach tilt: Marisol's car wasn't where it should be. The space in front of the building was empty, a rectangular absence, as if someone had erased her from the curb. Police were called in the way people call, when they can't bear to keep the fear inside their own walls. A patrol unit arrived, slow and cautious, the officer's hand resting on his belt like that gesture could hold the world in place. He took the report, glanced around the apartment, noted no signs of forced entry, no blood, no scattered belongings. It looked normal. That's what made it worse. A missing person case with no mess, no screaming clue, no obvious villain. Just a woman, vanished. But by that evening, the case stopped feeling like a simple disappearance, because her car was found, 30 miles away, nose angled into the weeds along an access road that ran behind an industrial park where the buildings went dark at 5 and stayed dark all weekend. The car doors were closed. The windows were up. The keys were not in the ignition. And on the driver's side floor mat, a single earring lay like a tiny piece of punctuation at the end of a sentence. Gold hoop, familiar to her family. Something she wore so often her mother could describe it without seeing it. Inside the car there were other contradictions. Her purse was missing. Her wallet, missing. But a school notebook was on the passenger seat, open to a page of neat handwriting, as if she'd been studying and then suddenly stopped. A pen rolled under the seat, and the glove compartment was half open, hanging like a mouth that couldn't decide whether to speak. The responding officer radioed for detectives, and when they arrived they did what detectives always do when the world is too quiet. They started counting the quiet things. Fingerprints. Fibers. Smudges. The faint outline of a palm print on the outside of the rear window that could have been anyone's, until it wasn't. The industrial park smelled of oil and dust and old cardboard. A chain-link fence separated the access road from a cluster of loading docks. No cameras. In 1996, cameras were not everywhere, not watching every angle, not saving every second. The streetlights were spaced too far apart. Shadows filled the gaps. And in those gaps, the investigators could only imagine. They asked about her last known movements. They returned to the grocery store, pulled time cards, questioned co-workers who looked suddenly guilty just because they were alive and she wasn't here. One cashier remembered Marisol saying she might stop for gas. Another remembered her laughing about a movie on TV. The manager said Marisol seemed normal. But normal is a lie people tell themselves so they can sleep. Under normal, there are always tiny fractures. Tiny hesitations. Tiny choices that become doors. Then a witness appeared, one of those people who lives in the edges of a story and only steps forward when the spotlight swings their way. A security guard at a nearby lot reported seeing a small sedan like Marisol's around 10 p.m., headlights off for a moment, idling near the side gate as if the driver didn't want to be seen. He couldn't see inside. He heard nothing. But he remembered the feeling, that something about that car made the hair on his arms rise, a quiet wrongness that you only recognize in hindsight. The guard wrote down partial plate numbers on a scrap of paper at the time, because he was trained to notice, and when the detectives compared it, the partial matched. Marisol's car had been there, under the dead lights, long before it ended up abandoned in the weeds. So where was she between 9:12 and 10 o'clock? And why were her keys gone? They canvassed the route between the store and her apartment, looking for payphones, gas stations, anyone who might remember her face. This was 1996, where payphones still existed like little confession booths, where you could disappear if you wanted to, where you could leave no digital trail at all. A clerk at a gas station off the freeway recalled a woman who looked like Marisol coming in around 9:40, buying gum and a soda, and asking if the restroom was open. He wasn't sure. Memory is a weak witness. But detectives filed it anyway, because missing people cases feed on maybes. As days passed, the story hardened. Flyers went up on telephone poles. Her mother's voice cracked on local radio, pleading, promising, bargaining with the universe. A hotline was set up. Tips poured in like rain into a bucket with holes. No matter how much you collected, most of it leaked away. Some callers claimed they saw her at a bus station. Some said they saw her with a man. One anonymous voice insisted she'd run off. Another voice insisted she'd been taken. The detectives watched the community split into factions, the hopeful and the furious, the ones who believed she'd walk back through the door and the ones who believed the worst, because believing the worst felt like preparing. Then the voicemail surfaced. It was discovered by accident, the way crucial evidence often is, someone checking her answering machine at home, hearing the beep, expecting a blank message from telemarketers, and instead hearing Marisol's voice, quick, low, controlled, like she was speaking with her teeth clenched. She didn't say where she was. She didn't say she was in danger. She didn't even say goodbye. She said, "Mom, it's me. I'll call you tomorrow. Don't worry." And then she stopped, like someone had signaled her to stop. A pause. A faint scrape. And a sound, soft, close, like someone shifting weight on carpet. The family played it again and again, trying to decode the spaces between syllables. Detectives took the tape, logged it, analyzed it with the crude audio tools of the time. The timestamp was murky, answering machines didn't always log perfectly, but it placed the message sometime after she left work. That meant she had access to a phone. That meant she was alive at least long enough to speak. And the way she said, "Don't worry," not soothing, but firm, made investigators wonder if she was speaking to two audiences, her mother and someone else in the room. The case escalated. Missing person became possible abduction. Possible abduction became likely abduction. And then, like a cruel trick, another piece of the puzzle arrived. Marisol's credit card was used once, the following morning, at an ATM near a strip mall. The withdrawal was small. The camera attached to the ATM was grainy, outdated, almost useless. It captured a figure in a baseball cap, head tilted down, the face a blur of shadow. The person's build could have been male or female. The person moved fast, as if rehearsed. And when detectives enhanced the image, frame by frame, they saw something that made the room fall silent. The person's hand, gripping the card, wore a ring, wide band, reflective, something Marisol did not own. The public didn't see that detail at first. The public only heard, ATM withdrawal. Possible sighting. And hope, that dangerous drug, surged through the town. Maybe she's alive. Maybe she's being forced. Maybe she's trying to leave clues. People started calling every time they saw a woman with dark hair. Every time they heard a scream. Every time they dreamed something and woke up shaking. It became a communal nightmare, the kind where everyone is half asleep, squinting at strangers, suspicious of every parked car. Detectives looked inward, because when the outside world gives you nothing, you turn to the circle closest to the victim. They questioned the ex-boyfriend, a man named Darren Holt, older, charming in the way men are charming when they're used to getting away with being loud. He said they'd broken up weeks earlier. He said he hadn't seen her. He said he was home watching TV. His alibi was a roommate who didn't like police and answered questions like he was being inconvenienced. Darren offered sympathy with a flatness that didn't sit right. But doesn't sit right isn't evidence. It's just a feeling. And feelings don't hold up in court. They questioned classmates, co-workers, neighbors. They pulled phone records, limited, nothing like today. They found no dramatic threats, no obvious stalker. They found what you often find in cases like this, the ordinary. A life made of small, repetitive moments, none of which seemed lethal. And then, weeks in, someone turned in a bag. A canvas tote was found in a dumpster behind a thrift store, miles from where the car had been recovered. Inside were items that made the detectives' hands go cold even before the lab could confirm anything. A hairbrush with strands of dark hair, a cassette tape labeled in Marisol's handwriting, class notes, and a receipt from the grocery store where she worked, dated the night she disappeared. The bag smelled like damp paper and old perfume. It looked like something someone had meant to throw away quickly, without thinking about the fingerprints, without thinking about the story those objects told. The community's mood shifted from hope to shock. The bag felt like a message. A taunt. A proof of life turned into a proof of control. And as detectives moved deeper into the investigation, they faced the most terrifying possibility in a missing case. that whoever took Marisol was not impulsive, not sloppy, not caught in a moment of rage, but patient, organized, careful enough to move her through a city full of people without anyone seeing. Years later, headlines would appear like thunderclaps. California 1996 cold case cracked, words sharp enough to slice open old scars, words that promised resolution with the arrogance of a breaking news banner. But in the beginning there was no crack, no break, no confession, no handcuffs. There was only an answering machine tape that refused to give up its secrets, an abandoned car sitting in weeds like a forgotten thought, and a family watching the calendar pages turn with a kind of helpless fury, because every day that passed was another day the world got used to Marisol Vega being missing, and the worst part of any disappearance is not the moment someone vanishes, it's the moment everyone else starts living again. The tote bag changed the temperature of the case, like someone had opened a freezer door inside the investigation and left it hanging wide. Up until that moment, the town could still pretend Marisol had slipped away on her own, chasing some secret reinvention, some last-minute escape from a life that felt too small. But the bag didn't feel like escape, it felt like handling. Like hands deciding what parts of her life to discard and what parts to keep. Like someone sorting a person into useful and trash. Detectives carried it into evidence like it might bite them, and in the harsh lights of the lab it looked even more wrong, because nothing about Marisol's routines had ever been careless, and yet here was her handwriting on a cassette label. Here was her brush with hair still clinging to the bristles. Here was her receipt, folded and damp as if it had been held in a sweaty palm and then stuffed away in a rush. They started building timelines with the desperation of people trying to catch smoke. The last confirmed sighting at the grocery store, the possible gas station stop, the security guard's report, the voicemail window, the abandoned car's location, the ATM withdrawal, and now this dumpster behind a thrift store. Each point was a pin in a map, and the string between them didn't form a neat line, it formed a snarl. A predator doesn't move in straight lines. A panic doesn't either. When a person is missing, every mile becomes a question. Was she driven? Was she walking? Was she conscious? Was she already gone? In 1996, investigators didn't have the kind of instant digital omniscience people assume police have now. No phone GPS. No real-time credit alerts. No cloud backups. The case lived and died on human memory, on whether someone happened to look out a window at the right time, on whether a clerk remembered a face among 100 faces, on whether fear made a witness exaggerate, or shut down. And fear was everywhere. It sat in living rooms with the TV on low. It rode in the backseat of every parent's car when they dropped their kid off at school. It followed women to their doors and made them check the locks twice. The detectives went back to Darren Holt with a different posture this time, not casual, not fishing, sharp, direct, eyes fixed on his face like they were trying to catch a twitch before it disappeared. Darren met them with a smile that was almost rehearsed, the kind of smile people wear when they think charm is armor. He offered them a beer. They declined. He talked too much. Then, when they asked about the ring scene at the ATM, the smile didn't fade, something else did. His confidence thinned, just slightly, like a sheet pulled tight and then nicked. Darren said lots of men had rings like that. He said the video was grainy. He said he didn't even know where that ATM was. He said he'd been home, he'd told them that already. He wanted to know why they were harassing him, why they weren't out looking for the real suspect. He wanted to sound like a man who cared. But his questions were strange, too specific. He asked if they'd found her purse. He asked if they'd found the keys. He asked if they were sure the voicemail was really hers. And detectives listened the way you listen to a door creak in a quiet house, because every extra sound could mean someone is inside. They took fingerprints from Darren's apartment, from his car, from anything he would legally allow, and they noted the small things. A fresh bottle of bleach under the sink, a new carpet cleaner receipt on the counter, the way he kept glancing toward a closed closet door as if he could feel the weight of whatever was inside. But still, nothing solid enough to shove through the narrow gate of probable cause. Suspicion isn't a warrant. Suspicion is just a pressure building behind the ribs. Meanwhile, the lab began its slow work on the tote bag. Hair strands were measured, compared. A partial print lifted from the cassette case came back smudged, incomplete, not enough points for an ID. Fibers found in the bag matched common upholstery. Common. Always that word, common, like the universe mocking them with how easy it is to vanish when everything you touch is ordinary. Then came the call that made the detective captain's jaw tighten. A woman reported she'd been followed in a supermarket parking lot 2 towns over. She described a man, late 20s to 30s, baseball cap, nervous movements, too close behind her, matching her pace, stopping when she stopped, starting when she started. She said when she turned to confront him, he smiled and walked away like it was nothing. It could have been paranoia. It could have been coincidence. But coincidence in a case like this is gasoline. Detectives asked her to look at a photo lineup. She stared at the faces. She pointed, hesitant but firm, to Darren Holt. That wasn't proof he had Marisol, but it was a flare in the dark. They started digging into Darren's past with renewed force. Prior calls to his address. Prior complaints. Bar fights. A restraining order filed years earlier by another woman, withdrawn later with no explanation. A pattern of getting angry fast, then apologizing faster, the kind of cycle people mistake for passion until it becomes a cage. Detectives interviewed the woman who'd filed the order. She didn't want to reopen the wound. She didn't want her name in a report. Her voice shook anyway. She said Darren had a temper that turned the air cold. She said he didn't like being ignored. She said when he felt like he was losing control, he would do things, little punishments at first, then bigger. And she said one sentence that lodged in the room like a bullet. He always said if someone tried to leave him, he'd make sure they never really left. They pressed Darren again. He lawyered up. That was his right. It was also a war. Once the lawyer stepped in, every question became a negotiation, every interview became a dance around silence. Detectives watched him slip away behind legal language, and it made them furious, because the longer he stayed out of reach, the more the case cooled, and the more Marisol became a photograph on a flyer, a face fading under sun and rain. Search teams expanded into the wild margins of the county. Desert scrub. Drainage canals. Dry riverbeds. Abandoned lots where refrigerators lay on their sides like dead animals. Volunteers showed up with gloves and water bottles and faces pale with purpose. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters swept slow arcs above the hills. But the land in California can swallow evidence the way the ocean swallows sound, wide, indifferent, endless places to hide a secret. They found bones. Animal bones. They found trash. They found old clothes. Every find made hearts jump. Every find led to disappointment, and disappointment is its own kind of exhaustion. Months passed. The task force shrank, as task forces do, because new crimes don't wait politely while old ones are solved. Leads dried into dust. The media moved on to fresher horrors. But Marisol's mother didn't move on. She became a constant presence at the station, a small woman with tired eyes and a purse full of photographs, asking the same question in 1,000 different ways. What do you have now? And the detectives, trained to be hard, to be controlled, began to dread her visits because they had to keep answering with nothing. Then, just when the case looked like it was slipping into the category investigators hate most, the unsolved that get stacked into a cabinet like a body into a drawer, another jolt arrived, violent and unexpected. A teenager found a set of keys under the bleachers at a high school football field. Not Marisol's apartment keys. Not her car keys. But a ring of keys with a cheap motel keychain attached, faded plastic, the kind you'd get from a place that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask questions if you pay cash. The teen turned them in because his father was a cop. The keychain read, Sundown INN. Detectives drove out there like the answer might still be warm. The Sundown Inn sat off a state route lined with fast food signs and dead palms, the kind of place where the air conditioner hums too loud and the carpets smell like cigarettes no matter how many times they're cleaned. The clerk in 1996 remembered nothing at first, because clerks at places like that learn to forget on purpose. But when detectives showed him Marisol's photo, something shifted in his face. He glanced at the back office door, then back to the photo. He said, slowly, that he thought she'd been there once, late, maybe close to midnight, walking with a man. He couldn't describe the man well. He remembered the man's hand on her elbow, not quite a grip, but not gentle either. He remembered the man paying cash. He remembered them asking for a room near the back. There were no digital records to pull. The paper ledger from that year had been thrown out. But detectives asked about the layout. They walked the property. The back rooms faced a dirt lot and a drainage ditch beyond it. Behind the ditch was a service road that connected to the same industrial area where Marisol's car had been seen idling. The hair on the detective captain's arms rose, because suddenly the pins on the map were starting to connect. Not neatly. Not cleanly. But in a way that felt like someone had known the geography, someone who understood how to move a person through gaps, through blind spots, through the dead zones of a city. They brought cadaver dogs to the ditch. The dogs pulled hard toward a patch of ground behind room 23. They circled. They sniffed. They Saturday. An alert. The kind that makes grown men swallow hard. The ground was dug up. They found nothing. No body. No clothing. No blood. Just damp soil and roots. The dogs could have been wrong. Or the scent could have been old. Or the scent could have been real and whatever was there had been moved. That possibility hit like a punch. She had been there. She had been held somewhere. She had been moved. The case, once a vanishing act, now looked like a corridor, one that someone had walked her down. The detectives went quiet about the Sundown Inn. They didn't want copycats. They didn't want Darren spooked if Darren was involved. They began surveillance anyway, watching him from a distance, watching his routines the way predators watch prey, hoping he would slip. And in that watching, they noticed something that raised a new kind of alarm. Darren didn't behave like a man grieving. He behaved like a man relieved. He went to work. He went to bars. He laughed too loudly. And sometimes, when he thought he wasn't being watched, he drove aimlessly, slow loops through industrial roads and motel strips, as if revisiting places where he'd once held power. But still they had no handcuffs. No confession. No physical evidence tying him to her car, to her bag, to her voicemail, to the ATM. The science of 1996 was a half-lit room compared to what would come later, and the detectives were working with tools that felt blunt against something sharp and careful. Then, in the third month after Marisol vanished, the community got another shock, because another woman, Elena Ramirez, reported an attempted abduction outside a night class at the community college Marisol attended. Elena described a man who approached her from behind, shoved something into her side, told her to get in a car, told her not to scream. She said she fought. She said she scratched his face. She said she ran. And the next day, a patrol officer spotted Darren Holt with fresh red marks on his cheek. The case flared back to life. Detectives moved fast, grabbing photos of Darren's injuries, comparing Elena's description to him, arranging a lineup. Elena stared at the faces and pointed. This time, there was no hesitation. She pointed at Darren like she was trying to stab him with her finger. The problem was, the defense attorney attacked her credibility, and the charges for the attempted abduction became a mess of reasonable doubt, because Elena couldn't identify the car, because there were no independent witnesses, because the scratch marks could have come from anything, because Darren claimed he'd been in a bar fight, because the world is full of loopholes big enough to drive a missing woman through. But the attempt told detectives something critical. If Darren was their guy, he wasn't done, or he wasn't satisfied, or he believed he could keep doing it and the system would keep missing. And that belief, the belief in invisibility, is what makes cold cases so terrifying. Not just that a person vanished, but that someone learned, in real time, how easy it was. The months turned into a year. Marisol's face stayed in drawers and on bulletin boards. Her mother aged in fast forward. Her roommate moved away, unable to live in a place that still smelled like Marisol's shampoo. The detectives rotated off and new ones rotated on, inheriting boxes of reports like they were inheriting someone else's grief. And through it all, one sound stayed trapped in the case file like a heartbeat you can't ignore. That voicemail, Marisol's voice, controlled, clipped, and that faint second breath. So close to the receiver it felt like the speaker was not alone. In the end, the most haunting thing about 1996 wasn't just that a woman disappeared. It was that the city kept moving around the hole she left behind, traffic flowing, neon signs blinking, people laughing in restaurants, lives continuing in the same streets where a predator might still be walking, because when a case doesn't close, it doesn't end, it lingers, it stains. It teaches everyone in the community the same brutal lesson. You can do everything right, you can follow your routine, you can make the call, you can leave the message, and still, on an ordinary night, the world can open up under your feet and never close again. By the time the first anniversary rolled around, the case didn't feel like a file anymore. It felt like a ghost that lived inside the station, quiet most days, then suddenly loud when a new detective walked past the evidence room and caught Marisol Vega's eyes on a photo taped to the cabinet. That same half-smile frozen in cheap print. The kind of smile that makes you irrationally angry, because it doesn't look like a person who knew what was coming. Outside, the town staged candlelight vigils under bleached street signs, the wax dripping down paper cups like time itself melting away, and reporters stood in front of the crowd repeating the same phrases until they sounded hollow, missing, unanswered, no arrests, family devastated. Inside, detectives listened to the voicemail again, hunting for the invisible man hiding in the static, and every time that faint second breath brushed the tape, the room seemed to shrink, as if the recording carried its own oxygen, and somebody else was breathing it first. Cold cases don't die. They dehydrate. They turn into brittle bundles of paper, and faded photographs and lab reports that smell like dust, and then, years later, one spark can make them burn again. In the Marisol Vega file, the spark came in a plain envelope with no return address, postmarked from a town 2 counties away. No letter, no confession, no ransom demand. Just a single Polaroid. The photo showed a motel room. Cheap bedspread, ugly pattern, ashtray on the nightstand. The camera angle was low, as if whoever took it was crouching. The most chilling part wasn't the room, it was the corner of the frame, where a woman's hand appeared, wrist bent awkwardly, fingers partially curled. Not enough to confirm it was Marisol. Not enough to confirm it wasn't. But around that wrist was a thin bracelet, silver, with a tiny charm, something Marisol's mother recognized instantly, because she had given it to her on her 25th birthday. The charm was a small sun, stamped with a smiling face, a ridiculous little thing Marisol had worn anyway, because she didn't like hurting people's feelings. The department treated the photo like an explosive. Gloves. Evidence bags. Magnifiers. They traced the motel's bedspread pattern to a supplier. They traced the Polaroid film type to a batch. They traced the ashtray logo to a chain of cheap motels that stretched along highways like bruises. They asked the mother to identify the bracelet again and again, trying to shake certainty loose from emotion, but her certainty didn't move. "That's hers," she said, and the words dropped into the room like a weight. If it was a taunt, it was a smart one. It offered just enough to torment, not enough to prove. It yanked the family back to the edge of hope, and pushed them over again into terror. And it ignited something else too, suspicion toward the investigators. Why hadn't they found this sooner? Why was there no body? Why was there no closure? In a vacuum, the community starts inventing stories, and the stories get sharp. The police were hiding something. The police botched it. The police didn't care, because Marisol was just a grocery clerk, just another brown woman in a big state, just another name that didn't make headlines long enough. Detectives hated that accusation, because it hit where it hurt. They did care, and caring without results is torture. They reopened every lead. They dug through old tip logs. They re-interviewed the sundown in Clark, who now admitted he'd been scared back then. Scared of the man with the hand on the elbow. Scared of being dragged into trouble. Scared of what happens when you say you saw something and the person who did it is still walking free. He remembered more now. The man had a ring. A wide band. Reflective. The same shape the ATM footage had teased. And suddenly the ring wasn't just an eerie detail, it was a signature. They went back to Elena Ramirez, the woman who'd survived the attempted abduction. She still had nightmares. She still avoided parking lots after dark. But she came in, jaw tight, and she told them again about the voice in her ear, the pressure at her ribs, the smell of cigarettes on the man's breath. She said, he kept saying, "Don't make me do this the hard way." Like he'd practiced it. Practiced. A word that makes your skin crawl, because practice implies repetition, and repetition implies there were other women who didn't get away. They started hunting for parallels. Missing women. Unidentified remains. Assaults dismissed as random. Reports filed and forgotten. They built a wall of cases, faces staring out, names printed in block letters, dates circled in red, and the pattern that emerged wasn't neat, but it was there. Late-night parking lots, small sedans, cash motels, victims who worked service jobs and walked alone, women who were the glue in their families, the ones people depended on, the ones predators pick, because predators think nobody will chase hard enough. Darren Holt kept living his life like a man whose shadow didn't scare him. He changed jobs. He moved apartments. He got married briefly, someone young, someone who later told investigators she'd been dazzled and then terrified, that Darren could be tender in the morning and vicious by night, that he'd wake up sweating, mumbling, snapping at her for being too loud even when she wasn't speaking. The marriage ended in bruises that were explained away as accidents, and after the divorce, Darren's name stayed in the system like a stain that never quite washed out. Still, no warrant. Still, no evidence that could survive a courtroom brawl. And the photo, if it was real, was a door that opened into a hallway of possibilities with no end. The case slipped again. Not because anyone chose to let it go, but because the world kept throwing new fires at the department. New victims. New calls. New bodies. And the Marisol file, thick as it was, returned to its shelf, a silent block of paper waiting for science to catch up. Science did catch up. But not like a movie. Not like lightning and applause. It came slow, with new machines and new budgets and new lab techs, who didn't care what year the evidence was from, only what it still held. When the department formed a small cold case unit in the early 2000s, the first thing they did was inventory what they had, every bag, every swab, every tape, every fiber. And when they reached the cassette case from the tote bag, the one with the smudged print that hadn't been enough back then, the new tech didn't dismiss it. She stared at it under a different light, and said something simple that made the room quiet. We can pull more from this. They reprocessed the cassette case. They reprocessed the tote straps. They reprocessed the car's interior samples that had been preserved in sterile packets like time capsules. They ran touch DNA analysis that didn't exist in 1996, and they waited for the computer to spit out a match like a slot machine that might finally pay. The first result wasn't Darren. It was nobody. A partial profile, male, unknown. Not in the database. A dead end that still felt like progress, because at least it was something that belonged to a person, not a theory. Then they ran the voicemail. Audio forensics had improved too. Not magic, but better. They cleaned up the tape, reduced the static, isolated frequency bands. The second breath became clearer, not a breath, exactly. A whisper of fabric. A small, impatient exhale. And beneath it, almost hidden, a faint tapping noise in a steady rhythm. Tap. 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 The tech turned the volume up and her eyes narrowed. That's not random, she said. That's a turn signal. A turn signal. A car. Inside a car, maybe. The kind of detail that doesn't matter until it matters, because if Marisol left that voicemail from a car, she could have been in the passenger seat, phone pressed to her ear while someone drove. And if someone drove, then the route mattered, the intersections mattered, the timing mattered. They compared the tapping cadence to the models of turn signal relays common in mid-90s sedans. It wasn't exact. But it narrowed. It suggested a certain make. A certain sound signature. And detectives, hungry for anything, treated that sound like a compass. They pulled Darren's driving history. His vehicle registrations. In 1996 he'd owned a late 80s sedan with a turn signal relay that, according to mechanics, could produce that exact tempo. Not proof. Not court proof. But enough to make the cold case unit look at each other like they'd smelled smoke. They went back to Darren with a new angle, not accusation, but pressure. They asked for a voluntary DNA sample. Darren laughed and refused. The refusal wasn't suspicious by itself, but his laughter was. Too loud. Too sharp. Like he was trying to turn fear into comedy. The detectives left, and as they walked out, one of them saw Darren's hand on the door frame, on his right hand, wearing a wide band ring. Reflective. Flashing in the sun like a signal. They watched him. They waited. They didn't have the authority to crack his life open, but they could follow the edges. Darren started acting differently. Not dramatically, not enough for an arrest, just little shifts. He changed his daily routes. He stopped going to certain bars. He swapped his ring for a slimmer one. He bought a shredder. That shredder mattered because, weeks later, a sanitation worker called in a tip. He'd emptied Darren's trash and noticed shredded paper spilling out, strips with ink that looked like photographs. The worker said he'd grown up in the area. He said he remembered Marisol's face on flyers. He said he didn't know if it meant anything, but it made his stomach flip. Detectives retrieved what they could from the trash, legal in that context, and sent it to the lab to be reconstructed like a jigsaw puzzle torn apart in rage. The reconstruction was imperfect. Most of it was meaningless, junk mail, receipts, utility bills. But two strips, when placed together, showed a curve of something dark and glossy. Hair. And beside it, a corner of white space with black marker, a single letter, M. Not enough to charge. Enough to haunt. Enough to keep the unit awake. Then a second envelope arrived, years after the first Polaroid, again with no return address, again postmarked from nowhere close, as if the sender wanted the distance to act as camouflage. Inside was a motel keycard, expired, scratched, and on the back, written in block letters, 2 words, Room 23. Room 23. The Sundown Inn. The place where the dogs had alerted. The room near the ditch. The number that kept resurfacing like a body that refused to stay underwater. Detectives drove there again, older now, faces worn by other cases, but the Marisol file still fresh in their minds like a bruise you keep touching. The Sundown Inn had been renovated. New paint. New carpets. New management. But the bones of the place hadn't changed. The back lot was still there. The ditch was still there. The service road still connected like a vein to the industrial area. They asked the new manager for old maintenance records. The manager shrugged. Most records were gone. But a maintenance worker, a man who'd been there on and off since the 90s, remembered something when he heard Room 23. He remembered a plumbing issue that year, 1996, weeks after a missing woman's flyer had been taped to the lobby window. He remembered going into that room to fix a clogged drain. He remembered the smell. Not sewage. Something else. Metallic. And he remembered seeing fresh paint on the bathroom door frame, paint that didn't match the rest of the room, paint thick enough to hide something. He had never reported it. He said he'd been young. He said he'd needed the job. He said he didn't want trouble. His voice cracked as he spoke, and you could hear the regret in the way he breathed, because regret is what people finally confess when the danger feels old enough to handle. The cold case unit requested permission to excavate again. This time, they went deeper. They tore up more earth. They tested soil layers. They searched the ditch banks for microscopic traces. And finally, after hours of digging that felt like peeling the skin off a wound, they found something small, pale, and unmistakably human, a fragment of bone, no bigger than a matchstick, wedged near a root. One fragment isn't a body. One fragment isn't a full story. But it is a truth. It is a human being reduced to a piece, and it is the sound of a community's hope collapsing into a harder kind of reality. The fragment went to the lab. The lab ran tests. The lab confirmed it was human. The lab tried for DNA, and at first the results came back degraded, brittle, almost nothing. Then a tech pushed again, reran, amplified, coaxed the genetic code out like a whisper. And the computer, cold and indifferent, returned a partial match to a known sample in the file, Marisol Vega. The phone rang in her mother's house, and when she heard the words, she didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She went silent, as if silence was the only place grief could fit. The detectives stared at each other in the lab corridor with a new kind of dread, because confirmation changes the mission. When a missing person becomes a probable homicide, the question shifts from where is she to who did this, and the killer, if he's still alive, now has a reason to panic. And panic makes people dangerous. Darren Holt, when he heard rumors, because rumors move faster than warrants, began acting like a man who could feel the walls tightening. He sold his car. He called in sick to work. He disappeared for 3 days. And when he came back, detectives saw something on his face they hadn't seen before, not confidence, not charm, not even anger, fear. Pure, bright fear, the kind that doesn't make you run, it makes you lash out. A cold case doesn't just wait. It watches. It waits for someone to slip, for technology to advance, for a witness to age into honesty, for a bone fragment to surface from the dirt like a cruel little flag planted in time. And now, with Marisol's DNA confirmed in the shadow behind room 23, the case was no longer a mystery floating in air. It had weight. It had a place. It had a point on the map that could be circled in red until the paper tore. And somewhere out there, in the same city, that had learned to live around the hole Marisol left behind. Someone who had been breathing too close to a phone line in 1996 might finally realize that the past had stopped being quiet. They treated that bone fragment like it was both a weapon and a warning, because once the lab whispered Marisol Vega's name back through the decades, the case stopped being an empty chair at the table and became something heavier, something that could drag a living person into court if they could only prove the hands that did it. And the first thing the cold case unit felt wasn't victory, it was pressure, the kind that makes your temples throb, because now every misstep mattered, every loose word to the wrong reporter could spook a suspect into running, and the city had already shown them how easy it was for a man to move through its gaps unseen. They tightened the circle, kept the excavation quiet as long as they could, but secrecy has a shelf life, especially when backhoes and evidence tents appear behind a motel, and when the first blurry photos hit the local evening news, human remains found in search connected to 1996 disappearance, the phones at the station lit up like a switchboard from hell, old witnesses calling to confess half memories, strangers calling to accuse neighbors, conspiracy callers insisting the police were framing someone, and in the middle of it all Marisol's mother sitting in her kitchen staring at a bracelet she could no longer pretend was just misplaced. Darren Holt felt it before the detectives reached him, because men like Darren don't need facts, they sense momentum, they sense the air changing, they sense the old safety of everyone else being too busy slipping away, and when he vanished for 3 days, the cold case unit didn't treat it like coincidence, they treated it like a pulse spike, a sudden sprint in a marathon, and they started pulling every legal lever they could without tipping him off further, building the case in pieces. Because cold cases don't crack with one loud bang, they crack with 100 small pressures applied in the right places. They went back to the first evidence, the stuff that had sat in sterile bags for years like sleeping animals, and they ran it again with newer eyes, because time changes science and science changes guilt, and the car that had been abandoned in weeds became, once again, a crime scene, not a relic. The lab swabbed the steering wheel seam, the gear shift, the inside door handle, the trunk latch, the fabric by the passenger seat where a nervous thumb might have rested, and touched DNA that would have been invisible in 1996 began to rise like fingerprints in powder, partial profiles blooming out of nothing, and when those profiles were run through the databases, one came back with a thin chime of recognition, not a name, not a direct match, but a familial hit, a suggestion that someone related to the unknown male profile had been arrested years later in a neighboring county, a petty assault, a bar fight, a guy whose last name meant nothing to the investigation, until they pulled the family tree and saw it. A cousin, by marriage, connected to Darren Holt's ex-wife. It wasn't a straight line, it was a tangle, and tangles are where cases die if you let them, but the unit didn't let it. They followed it down into records rooms and courthouse basements, flipping through paper that smelled like mildew, and what they found was the kind of ugly coincidence that stops feeling like coincidence when it shows up twice. Darren's ex-wife had a brother named Kyle. Kyle had a history of driving jobs, delivery routes, late shifts. Kyle had been questioned once in the early 2000s in a separate missing woman case and released. Kyle's cousin was the database near hit. And suddenly the unknown male wasn't just an abstraction, it was a shadow with a potential family name, orbiting Darren's life like a satellite. They pulled Kyle's DMV photos, watched the aging of his face across years of licenses, compared his jawline to the grainy ATM footage, compared his build to the security guard's description, compared his ring habits, yes, even that, because small details are what cold case detectives live on when big ones refuse to appear, and Kyle, in 2 different photographs from different years, wore a wide band on his right hand, reflective, the kind of ring that catches sunlight and attention, a ring that could be meaningless or could be an unconscious signature, like a predator's scent left behind without realizing it. But there was still Darren, the central gravitational pull, the man whose name made witnesses swallow hard, the man who laughed too loud when asked for DNA, the man who swapped rings when the pressure rose, and the unit knew they couldn't go to him with theories. They needed something that could survive a judge's stare, something that could open doors legally, because without warrants they were stuck tapping on glass while the answer sat inside. They started with what they could. They went after Darren's trash again, because trash tells the truth people don't mean to speak. They watched his house from a distance in an unmarked car that smelled like old coffee and long hours, waiting for trash day like it was a holiday, and when the bin hit the curb, they collected the bags and took them back to the lab, not hunting for dramatic trophies, not expecting blood-stained souvenirs like a movie, just hunting for the mundane, discarded tissues, used dental floss, coffee cups, cigarette butts, anything that carried skin cells and saliva and the casual arrogance of someone who believed the past couldn't touch him. The first run came back dirty, mixed profiles, nothing clean enough. The second run was better. A cigarette, but produced a clear DNA profile. Darren's profile, finally, in their system. Now they could compare it to the evidence properly. Now they could stop guessing. The comparison was not the clean, cinematic match people imagine. It was probabilities and partials and degraded strands that required careful language, the kind of language attorneys love to shred. Darren's DNA was not on the bone fragment, because bone fragments in wet earth don't always keep what touched them. Darren's DNA was not clearly on Marisol's brush, because years of handling and storage can smear the story. But Darren's DNA did appear, faintly, partially, on the cassette case from the tote bag, mixed with Marisol's, mixed with unknowns, like a fingerprint on a crowded doorknob. Enough to raise eyebrows. Not enough to close the file. And then the lab tech called with a detail that made the unit freeze. The unknown male profile from the car, one of the partials, was consistent with Kyle's cousin's family line, and when they obtained Kyle's DNA through a separate legal route, a small scrape off a cup he discarded at a roadside diner, it didn't match Darren's. It matched the unknown profile cluster from the car with a statistical strength that made the lab's phrasing turn firm. Kyle had been in Marisol's car. Now the story widened, because predators rarely work alone unless they have to, and when they do involve someone else it's either necessity or confidence, and confidence is what makes monsters careless. The unit didn't rush it. They built. They requested old phone records again, not just Darren's this time, but Kyle's, knowing the data would be limited, knowing carriers didn't keep everything, but hoping for any scrap. They pulled old employment logs. In 1996 Kyle had worked a delivery route that, on paper, passed within blocks of the Sundown Inn. Kyle had clocked out late the night Marisol vanished. Kyle's supervisor couldn't remember anything about that specific night, but he remembered Kyle missing a shift 2 days later, calling in with a vague excuse about family stuff, and in 1996 nobody demanded details, because everyone was busy and nobody knew what that absence might have meant. They brought Kyle in for an interview, careful, calm, the way you speak to someone you think might crumble if you press the right seam. Kyle arrived defensive, eyes darting, hands restless. He denied knowing Marisol. He denied being in her car. When the detectives placed the evidence in front of him, carefully, legally, without showing their whole hand, his denial shifted into anger, then into sarcasm, then into a kind of exhausted silence that made the air feel stale. He asked for a lawyer. He left. That night, a patrol unit responded to a domestic disturbance in Kyle's neighborhood. Just yelling, no injuries, just a neighbor calling because the volume sounded violent. The officer wrote in his report that Kyle had been agitated and appeared intoxicated. The officer noted a broken picture frame on the floor. And on the wall behind the frame there was a rectangle of cleaner paint, like someone had once covered something up and then redecorated their life on top of it. The cold case unit read that report and felt the old dread return, because every time a corner of the truth surfaced, it wasn't clean, it was stained, and they began to realize that if Marisol's case was going to crack, it would crack like rotten wood, splintering into ugly shapes, revealing more darkness than anyone wanted. They moved for a warrant on Kyle's property first, because they could tie him to the car more strongly than they could tie Darren, and sometimes you don't get the main door, you get a side window. The warrant was granted. The search was methodical. Dogs. Ground-penetrating radar. Metal detectors. Forensics techs photographing every inch. Kyle stood on his porch in handcuffs, not under arrest yet, but detained, watching his life get peeled open, and the look on his face wasn't just fear. It was resentment, as if the universe was being unfair by finally paying attention. They found nothing dramatic at first, just the normal debris of a life. Tools. Old clothes. A garage full of boxes. Then, behind a stack of tires, they found a small plastic container, taped shut, buried under junk like it had been hidden quickly and then forgotten. Inside were Polaroid negatives, warped with age, and a motel keycard holder with a faded logo, Sundown INN. The unit's hands went cold. The evidence had a smell of plastic and dust, and the moment they opened that container the case seemed to inhale. They rushed the negatives to a specialist. Negatives don't show you much to the naked eye, just dark rectangles like secrets, but under the right light, under the right scanner, images can resurrect. And when the first scan resolved on the screen, the room went silent in a way that felt physical. It was the same motel bedspread as the first Polaroid that had been mailed years earlier. Same pattern. Same ugly geometry. Same ashtray. Different angle. In this one, the camera was higher, and you could see more of the room, and on the floor near the bed there was a purse, Marisol's purse, recognizable by its distinctive woven strap shown in family photos. The image wasn't clear enough to show her face. It wasn't clear enough to show violence. But it showed possession. It showed control. It showed that whoever took those photos wanted to capture the proof of ownership the way hunters photograph trophies, and the fact that the photos were in Kyle's garage meant one thing. Kyle wasn't an accidental passenger in Marisol's car. Kyle was inside the story. The unit brought Kyle back in. This time, they didn't ask broad questions. They asked narrow ones. About the motel. About the photos. About his relationship with Darren in 1996. Kyle's mouth went dry. He tried to talk his way out with jokes, with denial, with rage, but the evidence didn't blink, and eventually something in him snapped, not into confession, not into clarity, but into a spill of half-truths that sounded like a man trying to shave his own guilt down to something he could live with. He said Darren had asked him for a favor. He said Darren needed help moving a car. He said he didn't know there was a woman. He said he was drunk. He said he panicked. He said Darren told him it was none of his business and to shut up. He said he never hurt anyone. He said he didn't even go into the room. Then he contradicted himself and admitted he'd been there, just once, just to drop something off, just to make sure everything was fine, and every just in his mouth sounded like a hammer hitting bone. They tried to get him to say Marisol's name. He wouldn't. They tried to get him to say what fine meant. He wouldn't. And the more he dodged, the clearer it became that Kyle wasn't the mastermind, he was the accessory, the weak link, the man who carried boxes, and kept quiet while someone else did the real work, and in the shadow of that realization Darren Holt's face loomed larger, sharper, like a knife finally emerging from fog. The unit moved toward Darren with urgency now, because evidence doesn't just create a case, it creates danger, and if Darren realized Kyle was cracking, he might run, or worse, he might decide to silence the crack. They sought a warrant for Darren's house, but the prosecutor hesitated, because prosecutors fear losing more than they love winning, and cold cases are fragile, and a failed warrant can set a suspect free forever. The prosecutor demanded more. Something tying Darren to the Sundown in beyond vibes, beyond witness memories, beyond a ring and a breath on a tape. So the unit went back to the motel again, to the place where room 23 had been repainted and renovated, to the place where the ground had already given up a bone fragment like a reluctant confession, and they did something that felt almost absurd. They peeled layers. They scraped paint. They removed trim. They drilled into the door frame, where the maintenance worker had remembered fresh paint. They collected microscopic shavings and sent them to the lab, not because paint solves murders, but because paint hides things, and sometimes what you need isn't a bloody weapon, it's the chemical fingerprint of someone trying to erase a moment. The lab found trace biological material embedded beneath a paint layer in the door frame, old, degraded, but present. Enough for a partial profile. Enough to compare. The comparison didn't land like a verdict. It landed like a whisper that could become a scream if you handled it right. The partial profile was consistent with Marisol Vega, and alongside it were faint male markers that overlapped with Darren Holt's profile in a way that made the lab's cautious language turn sharper than before. Not definitive, but suggestive. Suggestive enough for a judge to listen. And that's when the city felt it, even if it didn't know the details, because something about the air changed when law enforcement finally starts moving with purpose, when unmarked cars appear on quiet streets, when neighbors peek through blinds, when a man like Darren Holt wakes up and feels, in his bones, that the past is not dead. It's walking up his driveway with paperwork and gloves and a warrant ready to pry open every drawer where he thought time had buried his sins. Darren didn't run. Not yet. But he stopped sleeping. He started drinking more. He started calling people he hadn't spoken to in years. He started circling his own house at night like he was checking for enemies, and maybe he was, because the real enemy wasn't the detectives, it wasn't the lab techs, it wasn't the prosecutor. It was the simple, brutal fact that Marisol Vega had never truly disappeared. She had just been waiting, piece by piece, in paper and tape and soil, for the moment when the world finally learned how to listen to what she left behind. Darren Holt woke up before dawn with the taste of metal in his mouth and the sense that someone was standing in the room, even though the room was empty, even though the only sound was the refrigerator clicking on and the faint hiss of traffic beyond the blinds. And when he crossed the hallway barefoot and leaned over the sink, he stared into his own reflection like it was a witness he couldn't intimidate. Eyes bloodshot, jaw tight, the skin beneath his cheekbones pulled thin by sleepless nights, and for a long moment he just listened, because men who have lived a long time with secrets learn to hear danger in silence. Across town, in a fluorescent-lit office where coffee went cold in paper cups, the cold case unit slid a warrant application across a prosecutor's desk like a dare, and the prosecutor, a woman with tired eyes and a reputation for not gambling unless the odds were cruelly good, read it line by line, the sundown in fragments, the doorframe traces, the tote bag DNA mix, Kyle's garage negatives, the family hit from the car, and every paragraph felt like a finger tightening on a trigger that had been stuck for decades. The prosecutor didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She only asked one question, the question that always decides whether the past stays buried or not. Can you survive the defense? And the detectives didn't answer with confidence. They answered with weight, boxes of evidence, lab reports, witness statements, the kind of stubborn accumulation that doesn't guarantee victory, but makes retreat impossible. The judge signed. Paperwork doesn't look like justice, it looks like paper, plain and bureaucratic, but when that signature hit the page, the case changed direction like a car swerving on wet asphalt. They formed a team. They moved quietly. No sirens. No flashing lights. They wanted Darren calm enough to make mistakes, not spooked enough to torch whatever he still had. The warrant included his house, his vehicle if he still had one, his storage unit if they could locate it, his workplace locker, anything that might hold old trophies, or old paperwork, or old secrets that still carried skin cells, and the detectives packed gloves and swabs and evidence bags like they were preparing to excavate a grave that might fight back. They hit his house at 6:17 a.m. The neighborhood was still half asleep, sprinklers ticking, a dog barking once and then stopping as if it sensed something official in the air. The knock wasn't gentle. It was firm, practiced, a sound that changes a person's heartbeat in an instant. Darren opened the door in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, hair messy, face blank in the way men try to look blank when they are terrified. He didn't ask why at first. He stared at the badges, at the warrant, at the gloved hands, and then his mouth twitched as if he was about to laugh, as if this was absurd, as if the universe was playing a prank. They stepped inside. The house smelled like detergent and cigarettes and something else underneath, stale anger, old sweat, the faint chemical sting of someone who'd cleaned too aggressively. It was neat, but not naturally neat. It was neat like a stage set. Nothing out of place. No clutter. No personality. The kind of home where everything looks prepared for inspection. The search techs moved room to room, photographing drawers, lifting mattress corners, opening vents, checking the garage rafters, looking under sinks, tapping the walls for hollow spaces. Darren hovered in the doorway to his living room, arms crossed, eyes flicking to certain areas and away from others, telling on himself in the tiniest movements. They found the shredder first, heavy duty, the kind used for documents you never want reconstructed. They bagged the bin, careful, because paper dust holds fibers and sometimes fingerprints. They found a lockbox under the bed, small, cheap, and when they opened it, they found cash in neat stacks and a single motel keycard holder, blank, no logo, but old enough to have faded edges. They found a receipt book in the back of a closet, the kind you buy at an office supply store, with dates scratched in, amounts paid, names written in block letters, names that were not his wife's, not his employer's, not any known friend. Names that could have been fake, could have been aliases, could have been a list of people who mattered for reasons no one wanted to imagine. Then, in the garage, behind a false back panel that didn't quite match the rest of the wall, they found a showbox. The box was ordinary. That was what made everyone go quiet. Monsters don't always keep their trophies in ornate chests. Sometimes they keep them in showboxes like a child. The tech lifted the lid slowly, and the smell rose first, old paper, old perfume, a faint sweetness turned sour with time. Inside were photographs. Not Polaroids this time. Glossy prints. Some blurred. Some too dark. Motel rooms. Car interiors. A woman's purse on a bed. A close-up of a bracelet with a tiny sun charm. A receipt from a grocery store, folded the same way Marisol folded hers. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, a gold hoop earring. Marisol's earring. The detective captain didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He felt the weight of it in the air like a verdict. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. This wasn't a messy chain of maybes. This was possession. This was keeping. This was someone preserving the story on his own terms. Darren watched from the doorway, his face pale now, the blankness cracking. "That's not mine," he said too quickly. "I don't know what that is." His voice went sharp at the end, like a snap. The detective captain didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He simply nodded to the tech, and the tech sealed the box in evidence like sealing a coffin. They took Darren in for questioning. Not under arrest, yet. They wanted words. They wanted contradictions. They wanted him recorded saying something that could later be played back in court, until it cut through every defense strategy like a blade. In the interview room, Darren sat with his shoulders back, trying to reclaim control through posture. The light above him was harsh, making sweat shine on his forehead. The detective across the table spoke softly, not to soothe but to trap, because soft voices make people lean in, and leaning in makes them feel like they are in charge. Darren talked. He complained. He demanded to know why he was being targeted, why the police were wasting time on ancient history, why they couldn't just let families grieve. He kept saying ancient, like time erased sin, like years were bleach. They slid the photographs across the table, one by one. Darren's eyes flicked, involuntary, and for a split second something hungry moved behind them, recognition, ownership, a flare of irritation that the images were no longer his alone. He caught himself. He scoffed. He said anyone could have planted those. He said the police had a vendetta. He said he'd been harassed for years. He said if they wanted his DNA he'd get a lawyer and fight it because this was America, and he had rights, and the detective let him talk, because every word was a rope Darren was tying around his own throat. Then they put the voicemail on the table, not the tape, but the transcript and the audio printout, the waveform like a heartbeat. Darren glanced at it and laughed, and the laugh was wrong, too bright, too hard. You've been listening to tapes for 20 years, he said. That's your big break. The detective didn't respond. He simply played the cleaned audio. Marisol's voice filled the room, small but present, and Darren's laughter died halfway through like someone had cut the sound. His hands clenched. Not fists, not yet, just a tightening, as if his skin didn't fit right. When the tapping came, the turn signal rhythm, Darren's eyes snapped up, sharp, and in that moment the detective saw it, not grief, not shock, but calculation. Darren was hearing the evidence and measuring it, gauging how far the net had closed. That's not my car, Darren said quickly, before anyone even mentioned a car. The detective paused, let that hang like smoke. We didn't say it was. Darren blinked, once. A tiny stutter in his confidence. He adjusted his posture, his shoulders shifting back, as if he could physically push the mistake behind him. I meant it could be anyone's car, he corrected, too fast. People make voicemails from cars all the time. The detective leaned in slightly. She left that message to her mother, he said. Marisol. And she stopped speaking like someone told her to stop. What made her stop, Darren? Darren's jaw flexed. He swallowed. I don't know the woman, he said, and the words came out like a command. They brought Kyle in next, not into the same room, not face to face, because confrontations make people perform, and they didn't want performance, they wanted fracture. They put Kyle in another interview room and played him the evidence they'd found in Darren's garage and asked him, in a voice flat as a table, how Darren could possibly have motel photos and Marisol's earring if Kyle's story was true. If Kyle had just been asked to move a car. If Kyle had never seen a woman. If Kyle had just been a dumb errand boy. Kyle's face crumpled in slow motion. His eyes filled. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand like he was trying to wipe away the taste of his own lies. He kept things, Kyle whispered. He kept stuff. He said it made him feel safe. Safe. The word hit like a slap. Kyle stared at the table, voice trembling now, and the detectives could hear the internal war. The part of him that wanted to stay loyal to the man who'd pulled him into darkness, and the part of him that wanted relief so badly it could taste it. He said if you keep a peace, Kyle said, barely audible, then it never really ends. You're the one who decides when it ends. The detective didn't move. Did he decide when it ended for Marisol? Kyle shook his head, but the shake looked like a yes. Tears slid down his face. I didn't touch her, he said, as if repetition could make it true. I didn't touch her. I swear. I drove. I drove where he told me. That's all. Where? The detective asked, gentle, lethal. Kyle's breathing sped up. To the motel, he said. Sundown. Room 23. He finally said it. The number hit the recorder. It hit the transcript. It hit the case file like a nail hammered in. Kyle wiped his eyes, sobbing now, and the detectives felt no satisfaction, only a cold tightening, because confession doesn't bring the dead back, and it doesn't automatically build a conviction. It's just a door opening into an uglier room. What happened in the room? The detective asked. Kyle squeezed his eyes shut. I didn't go inside, he whispered. I stayed outside. I swear I stayed outside. He went in. He had her. He said she was being difficult. The detective's throat tightened. Did you hear her? Kyle hesitated, and hesitation is where truth lives. I heard, he started, and then stopped, like his own memory had teeth. He swallowed hard. I heard a thump, he said. And then nothing. Just the TV. Like it was on, loud, to cover it. The detective kept his voice steady. Did Darren call her mother? Kyle's eyes snapped open. He made her, he said quickly. He made her leave a message. He said if she sounded calm, people would wait longer to call the cops. There it was. The voicemail, finally, not just as eerie artifact, but a strategy. The detectives felt a grim clarity settle over the room like fog. This wasn't a crime of impulse. This was planning. This was control. They asked Kyle where Darren took Marisol after. Kyle shook his head. He claimed he didn't know. He claimed he left. But then he said something that made the detective captain's spine go stiff. He told me later, he told me the ditch wasn't deep enough. He said dogs are smart. He said you have to think like a dog. The captain stared at Kyle through the glass, listening to the words echo in his head, thinking of the cadaver alert behind room 23, thinking of the bone fragment, thinking of soil being disturbed and then smoothed over, thinking of someone returning to a place they'd already used, because it felt familiar and hidden, because familiarity is comfort even for monsters. They returned to Darren's interview room armed with Kyle's statements, but Darren's lawyer arrived before they could press him, a sharp-suited man, who slid into the seat beside Darren like a shield, and suddenly the air changed again, thicker, more formal, every question becoming a battle. Darren sat back, the smallest smile returning to his mouth like a bruise blossoming. I'm done talking, he said, and his voice was calm now, because silence is power when you believe the system can't touch you. The detectives didn't show him Kyle's confession yet. They didn't have to. Darren already knew something had shifted, because men like Darren can smell betrayal the way sharks smell blood, and as he was escorted out, he glanced back at the observation glass and for a fraction of a second his eyes narrowed, not at the detective captain, but at the space where Kyle's room would be down the hall. The look was pure, silent violence. A promise without words. That night, Kyle's house caught fire. Not a roaring blaze visible for miles, not a cinematic explosion, just a fast, hungry fire that started in the garage and climbed up the wall like it had been fed, like it had been guided. Kyle and his family got out. The firefighters said it looked electrical. The investigators said the wiring didn't make sense. The cold case unit stood in the smoky rubble the next morning, boots crunching on wet ash, and they didn't need a confession to understand the message. Someone was trying to erase, again, the way someone had painted a door frame, the way someone had thrown a tote bag into a dumpster, the way someone had shredded photographs, the way someone had trusted time to do the rest. But time was no longer doing Darren Holt any favors. Because the showbox was now in evidence. The earring was now photographed and catalogued and compared. The images from his garage were now being traced, their paper stock analyzed, their development lab identified, their dates approximated. And somewhere in that pile of glossy prints, a lab tech found something small in the corner of one photo, almost invisible unless you knew to look. A reflection in a mirror, a sliver of a man's hand holding the camera. On that hand, a wideband ring caught the light, flashing like a signal, and on the ring's surface there was a distinct scratch pattern, an irregular gouge that matched the scratch pattern on a ring Darren had worn in a 1997 DMV photo, a photo that had sat in public records all along, waiting for someone to care enough to compare the scars on metal. It still wasn't a body. It still wasn't a full confession from Darren's mouth. But it was him in the room, in the moment, behind the lens, documenting something he never expected anyone else to see. The case wasn't closed. It wasn't clean. It wasn't the kind of justice you can package into a tidy headline. It was a tightening spiral, a slow choke of evidence and witness fractures, an old dirt finally giving up what it had been forced to hold, and as the detectives drove home through streets that had been normal for so many years, they understood the sick genius of it. If Darren had been careful enough, he could have lived out his life in that normality, smiling at neighbors, buying groceries, breathing the same air as Marisol's mother, because the only thing more terrifying than a murder is a murder that teaches the killer he can get away with it, until, one day, the past comes back with gloves on, quietly, methodically, and starts taking everything out of the walls. The fire at Kyle's house didn't just scorch drywall and melt plastic, it scorched the last excuse anyone had left that this was all coincidence, because accidents don't send messages with that kind of timing, and when the arson investigator stood in the wet ash and said the burn pattern looked directed, the cold case unit heard a different word underneath it. A word they never wrote in reports, but carried in their bones: warning. Kyle was moved that same day, not into some cinematic safe house, but into the plain, nervous reality of protective custody, cheap motel curtains, a room that smelled like bleach and bad air, officers rotating shifts, the constant hum of a TV turned up too loud to drown out the fact that a man who once followed orders was now a liability someone might decide to erase. Darren Holt didn't need to light the match himself. Men like Darren rarely do. They just make people understand what will happen if they don't comply, and then the world supplies the hands. But the unit couldn't prove arson, couldn't prove intimidation, couldn't even prove Darren knew where Kyle had been moved, and that was the sick part. This wasn't just about catching a killer. It was about catching a killer who'd learned to live inside the gaps of what you can and can't prove. They worked those gaps like surgeons. They pushed every piece of evidence harder, because if Darren was going to hide behind lawyers and denials, the case had to be strong enough to stand without his confession. The showbox items went through forensic processing so meticulous it felt religious. Microfibers lifted from tissue paper, latent prints hunted on glossy photo edges, skin cells teased from the crease of the motel keycard holder. The lab kept calling with new fragments, never the clean knockout, always the kind of incremental progress that makes you grind your teeth. A partial thumbprint on the underside of a photo. A touch DNA mix on the earring's clasp that suggested more than one handler. A trace of adhesive on the back of the bracelet photo that matched tape used in Darren's garage. Little things. Little teeth. At the Sundown Inn, the excavation team returned, and this time they didn't treat the ditch like a single point. They treated it like a story written in layers. Soil doesn't forget, it just compresses. They mapped the ground in grids, peeled it away in careful cuts, bagged everything like it could speak, and as they worked, the motel's guests watched from behind curtains, faces floating in glass like ghosts witnessing ghosts. The air smelled like wet dirt and stale smoke, and every shovel scrape sounded too loud, because everyone knew what they were really digging for. Proof that Marisol had not simply vanished, she'd been placed somewhere. The ground gave them more bone. Not a full skeleton. Not closure. But more fragments, more scattered like someone had tried to break a body into anonymity, more pieces that suggested movement, disturbance, an original burial that didn't hold. They found a tooth. They found a small metal zipper pull, corroded, the kind that could have come from a jacket. They found a button, plain, nothing special, until Marisol's mother saw the photo, and her hand flew to her mouth, because she remembered sewing that exact kind of button onto a coat Marisol loved, the coat she wore when nights got cold and she didn't want to carry a sweater. The detectives watched the mother's face collapse and harden at the same time, grief turning into something sharper, something that had nowhere left to go but forward. She stopped asking, "What do you have now?" She started asking, "When do you take him?" The shift was subtle, but it changed the room. Because once a family moves from hope to vengeance, the whole case becomes heavier. It's not just paperwork anymore. It's a countdown in a mother's chest. And Darren Holt could feel that countdown too. He started playing defense like a man who'd rehearsed it for years. He filed complaints against detectives, accused them of harassment, accused them of planting evidence. He began dropping casual remarks to neighbors. Cops are trying to pin something on me. He told co-workers he was being targeted because he'd once sued a former employer. He tried to spread the narrative before the narrative could spread him. And then he did something colder. He contacted Marisol's family. Not directly, not with a phone call you could record, but with a letter slipped into the mailbox like poison. No return address. Typed, not handwritten. It said nothing explicit, no confession, no threats you could point to in court, just a few lines designed to rot the inside of a person. She ran. She didn't want you. Let it go. The mother read it 3 times, her hands shaking so hard the paper fluttered, and she brought it to the station as if it were a grenade, because she understood what it was, an attempt to rewrite the story, to move the blame from the hands that took Marisol to the family that loved her. A final act of control. The unit worked the letter for prints. Nothing. They worked it for DNA. A faint trace on the envelope flap, too degraded, too mixed. Darren had learned. Darren had watched for years how evidence was collected, and he'd adjusted like a creature adapting to traps. So the detectives went after what Darren couldn't adapt away from, time. They rebuilt his life around 1996, with the obsessive detail of people assembling a bomb they needed to disarm. Where he worked. Who he drank with. What car he drove. Which motels he'd been near. Which payphones he used. The credit card records from that era were thin, but motel managers remembered faces when you gave them a reason to remember, and one clerk from a different cheap motel along the highway, older now, slower to speak, looked at Darren's photo and said, "That guy. He used to come in with cash. Always cash. Always asked for the back rooms. Always the back rooms. Always the blind spots. Always the places where the world isn't watching." They found an old traffic citation from 1997. Darren pulled over near the industrial park at 1:13 a.m., claimed he was lost. The officer at the time didn't think much of it. There was no reason to. Now, with Marisol's case reopened, that little citation read like a flare. Why was Darren near the industrial park at that hour? Why did he claim he was lost in an area he knew? The defense would call it nothing. The prosecution would call it pattern. And pattern is what juries cling to when direct proof is missing. Kyle, under protective watch, began to unravel. He stopped sleeping. He asked for the lights to stay on. He flinched at footsteps in the hallway. And then, in a voice that sounded like it had been scraped raw, he told the detectives something he'd never said out loud before. There had been another person. Not a mastermind. Not an equal. A hanger-on. Someone Darren trusted for errands. Someone who liked the thrill of being near power. Kyle said the man's name once, quietly, like he was afraid it would summon him, Rico. Last name unknown. A guy from the bars. A guy who could get things, drugs, fake IDs, motel hookups, a place to stash something without questions. Kyle claimed Rico had been in the car when Marisol's vehicle was moved. Kyle claimed Rico had laughed about it afterward, like it was a joke. Kyle claimed Rico had once said, "Girls disappear every day. Nobody cares." Detectives chased Rico like he was a living fuse. They hit old bar records, old arrests, old associates. They found a Rico who matched the description, Rico Salazar, minor priors, drifter, always slipping just under felony weight. But when they tracked him down, They found an empty apartment and a landlord who said Rico had left weeks ago without notice. Gone. The second man in the story, if he existed, had evaporated into the same air that had swallowed Marisol. That disappearance cut both ways. It made Kyle's story feel true, because people in the shadows vanish easily, but it also made the case brittle, because without Rico to question, without Rico to corroborate or contradict, Kyle's words were just words, and words can be bruised in court until they look like lies. The prosecutor demanded something firm. She wanted the final bridge from Darren's possession to Marisol's death. The unit pushed harder on the motel evidence, because locations don't lie the way people do. They subpoenaed renovation contractors, who'd worked on the Sundown in years earlier, and dug through their old invoices. One invoice, dated months after Marisol vanished, listed work on room 23, replacement of carpet padding, repainting of bathroom trim, disposal of damaged materials. Damaged. A word that could mean water. Could mean mold. Could mean blood. The contractor, interviewed now, said he didn't remember details. He worked dozens of motels, dozens of rooms, but he remembered room 23, because the manager had insisted the work be done fast and paid cash on top of the invoice to not talk about it. The contractor laughed nervously when he said it, as if he could feel how stupid it sounded now, how complicit. Cash again. The same smell. The lab re-examined the carpet remnants that had been preserved from old motel waste records. Someone had kept a sample in a storage shed, because contractors keep everything they might need to match patterns later. They tested it. The result came back faint, but brutal. Trace human blood, degraded beyond full profiling, but with markers consistent with Marisol's maternal line. Not enough to declare it hers outright. Enough to make a jury's skin prickle. Enough to make Darren's lawyer sharpen his knife. The unit finally moved to arrest, not because they felt ready in their hearts, but because the case was beginning to feel dangerous. Dangerous for Kyle, dangerous for witnesses, dangerous for the fragile evidence that still existed in the world. They brought Darren in under a new pretext, something small, something administrative, and when he walked into the station he had that same practice calm, the same half-smirk, like he believed this was another round he could win with silence. The detectives read him his rights, and for the first time in this entire saga, the words felt heavy in a way that made everyone's throat tighten. Arrested for suspicion of murder. The news hit the town like a car crash. Cameras outside the station. Reporters shouting questions. People who'd forgotten Marisol's name suddenly remembering it. Suddenly saying it with outrage. Suddenly claiming they'd always known Darren was bad. Marisol's mother watched the broadcast from her living room, hands clasped so tight her knuckles went white, and she didn't cry. She just stared, as if she was afraid to blink and wake up. Darren, behind bars, didn't break. Not immediately. He didn't confess. He didn't rage. He did something worse, he smiled. He told his lawyer, loud enough for the guard to hear, "They've got nothing." He said it like a man reciting scripture. The preliminary hearing became a knife fight. The defense attacked Kyle as a liar trying to save himself. The defense attacked the DNA as partial and contaminable. The defense attacked the motel contractor as a cash-hungry storyteller. The defense attacked the bone fragments as unproven chain of custody, suggested they could have come from any number of tragic unknowns in a ditch behind a highway motel. Every piece of the case, one by one, was dragged into light and kicked, because that's what court does, it turns trauma into an argument. And then, right when the prosecutor thought she had momentum, the defense dropped a bomb, an expert witness challenging the audio forensic claim about the turn signal, calling it interpretive, not scientifically reliable, confirmation bias dressed as analysis. The judge listened. The judge frowned. The judge ruled that portions of the audio interpretation would be limited in trial. One of the case's most haunting psychological anchors, the idea of Marisol trapped in a moving car, forced to speak calm, was suddenly pushed toward the edge of admissibility. Outside the courtroom, Marisol's mother shook with rage. Not at the judge. Not at the lawyers. At the universe. At how the system demanded clean proof for a crime that had been designed from the start to leave nothing clean. Darren returned to jail still smiling. That smile was a message too. You can't touch me. But the unit had seen messages before, in fires and letters and showboxes, and they understood something that made their blood run colder than any lab report. Darren wasn't just fighting a case, he was fighting the idea of losing control. And men who worship control don't always wait for a jury to take it from them. 2 weeks before the next hearing, a guard found Darren in his cell, slumped on the floor, lips tinted blue, eyes half open like he'd been interrupted mid-thought. Overdose. Prescription medication hoarded, crushed, taken at once. The jail called it self-harm. The defense called it tragedy. The detectives called it what it felt like, an escape route. He didn't die. Not that day. Paramedics brought him back, harsh and fast. But when he woke in the infirmary, restrained, he stared at the ceiling and said nothing. No confession. No denial. Just silence so thick it felt like a wall. And in that silence the case tilted again, because a trial can convict a man, but a man who refuses to speak can still take the full story to his grave. And as the cold case unit stood in the hallway listening to the faint beep of a heart monitor, they felt the old dread return in a new form. Even with evidence, even with an arrest, even with bone fragments rising from the dirt, the truth could still remain just out of reach. Not because it didn't exist, but because the person who knew the final details might decide that the last act of power he could wield was to keep them locked inside his own mouth forever.